Well, hello, good people. Stephanie Hancock here, and I am a candidate for Colorado House District 41. And if you live in zip codes 80012, 13, 14, 17, or 80247, you are in my district. Now, we've got some real concerns and things we need to keep our eye on during this election season because crime, cost of living, and education. Those are the three things that are most important for Coloradans this year. And I want to talk to you a little bit about education with my subject matter expert, Molly Lamar, who is running for the Colorado State Board of Education for CD6. You know, my question for you, Molly, today is, how do we attract and keep teachers? It's the toughest profession I could think of. I don't have the acumen to do it, but I know you do as a former teacher. Tell me how we can do this.
Well, thanks for having me, Stephanie. I really appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you and talk about how we can help our teachers stay in a profession that they were called to do. With the cost of living where it is right now, I don't know how teachers are doing it. With the average teacher salary being $55,000 a year, and the cost of gas at $5 per gallon, I don't even know how they drive to work. You know, sometimes, for example, when I was teaching, I lived in Denver near Wash Park, and my school was all the way up by 84th and I-25. That would be very expensive for me. And I think it's important not only that we look at increasing teacher pay, we need to recognize, and one of the reasons we should do that is that teaching is one of the most difficult professions. It's not something that you leave at your desk at the end of the day. You carry the burden of knowing what's happening and sometimes not knowing what's happening in the lives of your students when they leave your classroom. And sometimes that can be very, very heavy, especially in those lower socioeconomic areas where children aren't just facing, for example, learning gaps. They're facing, abuse, neglect. Maybe a parent has a substance abuse problem. And so I think we've really got to take a look at incentivizing our teachers. We want to attract the best and the brightest. Teaching is a calling, and so you should be rewarded for a profession that really requires that you give 100% of not just your head, but your heart. Mm-hmm. And we need to incentivize when we look at our current reports as to how our students are performing across the state. First of all, it's horrible. I mean, 40% of our kiddos in Colorado in third grade are not reading at grade level. 60% of them are not reading at grade level. Only 40% of them are proficient in reading. 70% of our students are not proficient in math. That's unacceptable. If you go to some of the lower socioeconomic areas, I guarantee that those scores are much, much worse than that. We just got a report that only 5% of our Black and Brown students in DPS are performing at grade level.
So you're saying to me, Cherry Creek school kids, 40% of them are only reading at grade level in Cherry Creek.
So they took the average across the state, and the average is 40% of our students. So maybe Cherry Creek has a higher percentage of those because they're a higher performing district, but 40% of our students are performing at grade level, meaning 60% of them are not.
And so if the Title I school like you are at, a poor school district socioeconomically, they're doing even worse.
No, especially after COVID. I mean, some of those kiddos don't have access to internet. They don't have, here we go on a hybrid and remote learning schedule. How do they get access to their classroom and their teacher? Mm. And now that we are back in the classroom, it's important as we try to close those academic gaps to get the best and the brightest in those areas. So let's incentivize those teachers.
Pay teachers more.
Pay teachers more, but especially those teachers that are willing to take on the hardest areas and the hardest, gaps to close.
So teaching is a calling. And if you're a teacher, don't give up, because with Molly Lamar on the Colorado State Board of Education, she's going to fight, right? She's going to fight for teachers to get more pay and to treat teachers with the respect that they're due.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you.